Recording. So this is a genderbread person. We would have started last week by identifying that when we speak about sex, we are referring to the biological makeup of an individual. So the terms that are used when we discuss sex or that you will hear are predominantly male, meaning that they have most of the times they have a penis and they have XY chromosomes. And then we have females who tend to usually have a vagina in most situations, ovaries, but all females have XX chromosomes. So this is why, because of the advent of persons having sex changes, etc., it's why sex is now more so defined by a person's chromosome or their chromosome structure more than the existence of a penis or a vagina or ovaries or testes, etc. Because people are having them removed. But you can't change your chromosomes. In the middle of this continuum of male and female, we have what is termed intersex persons. Now, intersex persons are individuals who are born with both male and female genitalia. So in some instances, they may have what may look like an extremely large clitoris that resembles a penis, or they may have a very small penis that resembles a vagina, right? And so in the past, we used the term hermaphrodite, however, that is now seen as a discriminatory term. And so the now politically correct term is intersex, someone who has both male and female genitals. However, even though an intersex individual may have male and or female genitalia, the chromosomes are one thing. It's either XX or XY, right? And so if you think of Caster Semenya and I think there was another athlete who, when they tested, they found there were unusually high levels of testosterone. At the end of the day, they were permitted to run in that era, in that time, on account of their chromosomal structure. Very interesting case. And now we're seeing where in the sporting fraternity, we have persons who have their gender expression and their gender identity is no longer what they identified as from birth, participating in sports. So what's this whole thing with gender identity and gender expression? When we talk about gender expression, I shouldn't say we, when persons talk about gender expression, this more so refers to how they appear on the outside, how they demonstrate their gender. Usually it's based on traditional gender roles. So this is things like how you dress, how you behave, how you interact with others. So as the chart shows, sex comes down here, your chromosomes, your genital area. Your gender expression is the external appearances. So you have, when I was growing up, we used to call them cross-dressers, and or even drag queens to some extent. Now, the assumption is that if a man's gender expression is feminine in nature, meaning he likes to wear the lipstick and the makeup and the dresses, that this man is gay. However, they have found that not all men whose gender expression is feminine actually identified, or they are not necessarily gay. Their sexual orientation is not gay. That's what they say, right? So again, we're going through the terms so that when you hear it, you understand what people are saying, what they mean, and you know how to respond and how to address it, right? Now, so gender expression goes along in 2021 along a continuum between feminine and masculine. So masculine attire in the past, or traditionally, would have been loose-fitting pants, You may see a shirt, a male type of shirt or so. And now we notice that gender expressions associated with male is moving closer to the androgynous or even feminine side, where you see a lot of the attire that men are wearing is becoming a lot more close-fitted. You're seeing also the advent of what they call the metrosexual man, the man who is very much more concerned about his external appearances, going spa days, getting the facials, nails, and all those other things. Now, whether you, what's your position on that? That is not what we're here to discuss this afternoon. We're here to go through the terms. Now, in between the feminine and masculine gender expression, meaning how you dress, behave, interact, etc., is the term androgynous. Now, there is a segment of persons who you mainly see it in the attire. It's androgynous, meaning that it is a little bit of male and a little bit of female mixed in it, right? So what you would see this, at least I see it more so in the workplace, where you would see some women dressing more like males in an attempt to, I think, bridge the gender gap. But you're also seeing it more so, I think, in pop culture and among celebrities, where you're seeing more males dressing like females, but still identifying as a male man, a male heterosexual man. But they're saying that it's just clothes, it's just, you know. So that is the gender expression. Everyone is following with me so far? Is there anyone who would like me to repeat anything that I said? We have covered so far biological sex, male, intersex, and female. Sorry, male, intersex, and female. And we've covered gender expression, how I attire myself, how I demonstrate my preferred gender to the world. Everyone is following along? Give me a thumbs up if you are. If you don't understand, just mention it in the comments so that in the chat so that I could review. Right. Next, we're going on to sexual orientation. Now, sexual orientation refers to attraction, or as some people put it, who you love, right? Who are you attracted to? Now, the continuum includes homosexual, meaning that you're attracted to someone of the same sex as you, meaning, remember we talked about sex, so I have XY chromosomes as a man, and I am attracted to other men, or I am attracted to persons with a masculine gender expression. Yeah. Then we have heterosexual, which is persons who are attracted to, sexually attracted to, or they love persons of the opposite sex. So if I am female, I am attracted to male masculine men, right? If I am a man, I am attracted to female feminine woman. In the middle, we realize that there's now on a third category. I'm not going to go too far into the whole types of sexual orientations. I'm keeping it simple: heterosexual, homosexual, and bisexual. These are persons who are attracted to both persons of the same sex as well as persons of the opposite sex. So they are male and they're attracted to both men and women. Now, you would hear some other terms emerging, such as pansexual, asexual. Is there any other one? I think you would hear the term cis as well. But pansexual refers to more an attraction of a person's energy, a person or an entity's energy, as opposed to their biological sex or even their gender expression, right? So pansexual, I just love everybody, anything. I'm more attracted to a person's energy or a person's mind, their intellect. And then we have asexual persons who generally are not sexually attracted to people on a whole, right? What's the chat like? I'm seeing some comments. Anybody needs anything cleared up, or we okay? Right? And yes, I know we've come a long way, and it is a right to keep abreast in terms of all the things. Years ago, when I worked at Ministry of Health in the HIV and AIDS coordinating unit, the term was just LGBT. And then it became LGBTQ. And by the time I left, it was LGBTQ plus. And now it's LGBTQIA, right? So the L in LGBT is lesbian, B is for bisexual, G is for gay. So lesbian, gay, bisexual. T is for transgender, right? And transgender comes about when we explore the gender expression part of it. So if I was born a male man and my gender expression and my gender identity is feminine or as a woman, persons who are called transgendered are those persons who would dress or engage the world in a gender that is not in line with the gender with which they were born. So that brings us to, so we did lesbian, LG, gay, B for bisexual, LGBT, transgender. So when we come to transgender, that's where gender identity comes into place. Now, gender identity is how a person thinks about themselves in their mind, in their head, right? So you would have seen by now, at least you would have come across at least one video or one testimony or so of an individual who would have said, you know, I was born a woman, but when I looked in the mirror, I didn't like what I see. I didn't feel like a woman in my body. I felt like a man trapped inside a woman's body, or I felt like a woman trapped inside a man's body. You would hear those phrases, terms, right? So those are statements related to a person's gender identity. Now, the gender identity tends to include mainly, I identify as a woman, Jesse would identify as a man, but then there are persons in the midst of it who identify themselves as gender queer. So they don't see themselves as either male or female, sorry, as a man or a woman. They see themselves as both. Now, we did lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender. Very often, persons who are transgendered are those individuals who they were born either male or female, but they identify as someone of the opposite sex. And so they also identify with a gender expression or prefer to express their gender in a way that is not the norm for persons of their biological sex, right? So LGBTQ, Q in the LGBTQ are those persons who are gender queer, right? So one day they may dress like a man, one day they may dress like a woman, one day they may have on a pantsuit and heels. I saw there was a man who identifies as heterosexual male, but he said he just likes to wear skirts and high heels. His gender expression was feminine. Now, I know everyone has their own thoughts about these things. I know one of the prevailing thoughts is that any female that dresses like a man is gay but hiding, or gay and lying to themselves. Similarly, any man that dresses like a woman, likes to wear female underwear, etc., is a closet gay. That's the term that's used, right? Now, as mentors, we have to recognize that the majority, especially if you're going to be mentoring young persons, Eric Erickson, the psychologist that Jesse would have introduced you in module 1, identifies that one of the critical issues that has to be resolved among young persons is that of your sense of self and identity. And so it is important for you to be knowledgeable about these things. I'm not addressing your belief system, but you need to know the terms so that when young people are speaking, they're talking, you see particular things happening, you have a better idea. And with the information, you now are able to guide them in the way that you think is most beneficial for them, in line with your faith, in line with your belief system, as well as understanding the cultural influences that create these, create ideas about who we should be, right? And all of this, of course, must, and I would recommend definitely should be guided by the Holy Spirit, right? So these are key terms I want you all to be mindful of, right? So we've said gender. We talked about the difference between gender and sex, that gender is a socially constructed ideals, roles, and expectations of a particular sex. Sex, however, is genetically based. We now say based on your chromosomal level. So we would have looked at the gender-bred person and identified different, what is masculine or feminine. And last week we would have explored the concept of the gender box and seen that there are ideas and ideals about what a man, what it takes to be a man, what it takes to be a woman, and ideas or ideals about the behaviors that are expected and the consequences as well if persons engage in behaviors or engage in actions that fit outside the gender box. And we would have identified some of the punishment could include ostracizing, labeling, shunning, and even, which is the whole point of this course, even acts of violence if persons engage in behavior outside of the gender box. So I touched briefly on the definition of gender stereotype. And a gender stereotype is the idea or belief that all members of a certain group are very similar, leaving no room for individual differences. So when we talk about, that's a stereotype. So when we talk about gender stereotypes, we're thinking in terms of statements like all men are dogs, statements like women belong in the kitchen. These are stereotypes because, one, it is a belief system that all members of this group of males, all males, are similar. All men are dogs. But are all men dogs? That's the question I want to hear some feedback in the chat, or you can take the mic. In your experience, are all men dogs?
Of course not.
Of course not. So then it has to be a statement that is a stereotype. So what about the statement, all red woman is headache? Is that that would be a racial stereotype, I guess, or it's just not necessarily colorism type of stereotype. So when we think of gender stereotype, you're thinking of statements that we say sometimes very flippantly, or we just say it's repeated very often, and we don't recognize the impact that it creates in terms of how our young people see themselves and how they see others. Women belong in the kitchen. Women are to be seen and not heard. Or even children. I know we're not here to talk about the children and young people, but children should be seen and not heard. You know, all of these stereotypes and ideas, which are often negative most of the times, really shape the way that we think about ourselves and think about the opposite sex. So where do these ideas and ideals come from? That's where we touched on last week. That was the question, at least, that we were trying to wrap things up with. And we found that a lot of these ideas and ideas, again, stem from the way we were socialized. They stem from that gender box that is created around boys, around girls, in terms of what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman. And a big part of that is our family history and even cultural values. Now we're gonna look at a video of a young boy. I know that for your homework, you were supposed to answer a couple questions. I hope that some of you did the activity where you explored what you learned from your mother, what it means to be a woman. In my case, when I was doing the activity, I had to answer the question, what did I learn from my mother about what it means to be a woman? What did I learn from my father about what it means to be a woman? What did I learn from my sisters or my aunts, my uncles about what it means to be a woman as a child growing up? And similarly, we have to acknowledge the cultural values and cultural influences and how that impacts on our concept of what it means to be a man or a woman, what our role is in society, what we can and can't do, what are the expectations of our behavior. So in the realm of politics, did you know that worldwide, there are about the ratio of male to female in politics is 3-1. And then we have the notions, or I don't know how to put it, the scripture verses, as well as the different theologies and ideologies that are bandied about in different religious circles and sects. So, and then there's media, right? Our music, our television, what we look at, all of these things shape our cultural concepts, even our history. I don't think we have enough time to talk about the impact of slavery on the Caribbean family, and even our ideas about whether males or men's role in family, and that historical trauma that is deep-seated, that this idea of not seeing stable homes or two-parent households. And we don't have time to go into all of those things. I will be sharing a couple of videos or documentaries for you to look at, which can speak to some of those things. But definitely today we will be touching just a little bit, not a whole lot, on the impact of religion. But we'll deal with that towards the end of today's session, right? So we're going to look at pieces of a video. We don't have time to watch the entire thing. And after we watch that video, I want for us to, we're gonna dig it apart a little bit and see what lessons can be gleaned from it. And the questions I want you to think about are the same questions that you would have had to explore for your home assignment, your journal entry. Let me just see if I can get this shit. All right. Now, because of the time, I'm speeding up the video. There's no real audio for it, but I want you all to take a look at one. We're going to explore one, and I want you all to share what your thoughts are. All right. So let's get some quick feedback before we continue. So what are your thoughts about what you've seen so far? Yeah, remember you can use the chat. And would you all prefer if I stop the recording? Because I wasn't clear if it's that you feel more comfortable talking, knowing that it's not being recorded.
I'm comfortable with the recording.
Okay. All right, so let's get some feedback. The first question, what did you all observe about Juan and his family? Okay, would somebody take the mic and share? What did you observe about his family? What type of family did he have?
Okay, good night, everyone. There was a definite gender approach that the woman is supposed to take care of the child, do everything while the man sits down and watch TV and does nothing. And that is a gender bias approach.
Yes, that is definitely a gender stereotype that the man is to sit down and do nothing at home while the woman should be doing all of the work. And when it comes to minding the children, he should be the one to not do that. What else did you all observe throughout his chat with his family? Let's start with the family. What about the father?
And when they speak again, because another Rosanna is not feeling well, I know about the allergies to see with my daughter too. So I thank you to be here with us.
Thank you.
The father was reinforcing the gender stereotype situation of taking the child back to the mother.
Yes, right. And we also see in the video, there was that moment when he came home drunk. And what did you all think about the bubble? You all need me to put it back up, the bubble where what one was envisioning when his parents were arguing? Let me hear from Lynette. Are you in a position to speak? Are you in a safe space where you can speak? Lynette Cox. Okay, I guess Lynette is not in a safe space. All right. So some of the things that we would have seen as well with the video with his family, when his father came home drunk in that particular instance, first of all, is it possible that his father, that we saw even before all of that, his father watching football, you notice that the very first, when he got a little older, it was a football that he was pushed to play with. Did you all observe that? And then we also would have noticed that throughout his younger childhood days, there was this big pencil. What do you think that pencil represented in this video? I just put it in the chat. Let me see what y'all are, where your heads are at today. What do you think the pencil represented? And remember, there are no wrong answers. This is your opinion. What do you think about the pencil?
It represented anything that influence the child with any peer pressure or societal norms or.
All right, so Jessie was sharing that, so I'm trying to find my.
Alison says reinforcement of gender patterns.
Yes, definitely. Yes, definitely, right. Sorry, I'm trying to find where my mic stuff is. I have too many tabs open right now. So the pencil throughout the video, you would have noticed that it represents, as Sister Lauren said, it represents the reinforcement of different gender ideals and ideas. Now, I want us to take note that this pencil, even though once you're in a gender workshop, very often you tend to walk away feeling that all gender socialization is negative, but I want us to recognize that it is largely based on your culture. And so whereas in one culture, it is not culturally normal for a man to wear lipstick. And so for example, in the video at the scene, when he was putting on the lipstick, the pencil came out and erased that from him. But there are other tribes and cultures across the world where it is the norm for the male to adorn themselves. I'm not saying wear makeup, to adorn themselves. They would be, I remember we were watching about a tribe in Africa. I can't show, that's what you wanted to show?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, darling. He just wanted to show that video next week. But there are different cultures. There's this tribe where it is the norm for the male to adorn themselves, to whiten their teeth, put on eyeliner, etc., to attract the females. Very similar to what happens among birds, where you would see that it is the male bird that tends to be the more beautiful creature. But in this culture and in our culture, it is not the norm. So gender socialization, the pencil, not in every instance, the pencil, I want you to think of the pencil as this big bad wolf or this big bad stick. But it can be used in positive ways. And that honestly is one of the benefits of the mentorship program, that you know, as a male who may be mentoring other men or other young men, that pencil, you are modeling to them that this is what a positive male looks like, who is responsible with the influence and the power that he has in society, right? We would have also seen as he got older and was riding his bike, how just seeing other characters would have influenced him or made him think, well, you know, I want to be the big strong man, or I want a fast car and a sexy woman, or I want to, you know, become a politician. And it's important for you to be mindful that it is very likely that the persons that you would be mentoring fall within this particular age range and age category. So let's continue on in the story. So what I'm skipping forward, even though I really have time, do I have time to go through everything? So some of I'll send you all the link for the video. So what happened was, one, as he got older, fell in love with this young lady, Maria. So let's see. He then went on to try to court Maria. Let's see what happens with one. All right, so let me skip ahead to, where's that? Let's see. Can you laugh? Something's happening in the chat?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so yeah, here we go. So as you see in the story, Juan and Maria, one at this point is a high schooler, just to clear things up, and they engage in a sexual relationship. Now, this video really was intended to talk about not just gender, but things like HIV, etc. So there's what I would have skipped ahead would have been some of the stuff that speaks more to condom negotiation and the gender dynamics of power with regards to sex. Now, I'm not dealing with that because we want to focus just a bit more on gender-based violence. If this was the full 3 months course, we definitely would have to dig into some of those things, as they do have implications, especially when it comes to marriage and how the ideas that women feel about men having rights over our bodies. So we will touch a little bit on it a little later, but for now, we just skipping ahead with the story. So this is one, the day after he and Maria would have had sex. All right. So let's get some feedback. So we would have identified that the video was showing the influence of the pencil, those ideals about what boys should and shouldn't do. And eventually you see the influence of one's peers pushing him to eventually engage in a relationship, a sexual relationship with someone else, right? And eventually that would have led to him getting an STD, right? A sexually transmitted infection. And so coming out of all of that, we see that Maria ended up getting pregnant. And he, as a result of you're dealing with an STI, you're dealing with your girlfriend pregnant, what did he resort to do? Come on, guys, let me hear from you. I will wait. So let me hear from you. I'm waiting. What did he resort to do when he found out he had both an STD and that he got his girlfriend pregnant? Thank you, Brian. And Sister Louis, he resorted to drinking. And so we see coming out of that incident, he falls right back into some of the same patterns that he would have seen growing up as a child. He saw his father drinking. He also would have seen his father hitting his mother and quarreling, etc. And so you see that was going to happen again, but fortunately for him, he caught himself. He was able to identify or get a flashback that, hey, this is exactly like daddy. But you notice that there was a period of time before he decided to become involved in his son's life where they were separated. He seemed to be very depressed and down, etc. And he seemed to be going through the motions. And it wasn't until, what was the turning point in the video? Do any of you remember what was the turning point for him in the video?
I think that he saw a father taking care of his child.
Right. Very, very, very good. Thank you again. He saw a father taking care of his child. Now, the thing is that when in that part in the video, you would have seen all of the flashbacks of everything that he would have seen before that would have said that this is not what men do. But because he saw the example that this is a man with in a loving relationship, the man, well, we assume the man ordered flowers for his wife and it was the man who was bottle feeding this baby, then he decided to change the way that he was operating, change his approach to fatherhood, to become more involved. Now, your assignment for last week was that you were supposed to explore some of these questions, right? So we want to spin this assignment. I'm going to split you up into some breakout rooms, and I want you to engage each other. The question that I want you to ask in terms of the video, because I know for some persons, it's not always easy to share about your own childhood or to share about your life experiences. But I want us to look at the video, to explore, to remember the video, and to identify 3 messages that you think one would have learned from, well, one message that he would have learned from his mother about manhood, one message he would have learned from his father about manhood as well. All right. So let me increase that number to 2, right? So I want you to write it down so you remember what you're doing. 2 messages that he would have gotten from his mother about what it means to be a man, and 2 messages he would have gotten from his father about what it means to be a man. All right, so let me put 20%. All right. So I'm going to put you into the breakout rooms now. When you go into the groups, I'm going to give you 10 minutes to discuss the video. What are the messages? And if you come up with more than 2 messages, that's fine. I also would like for you to select someone who would present what your group would have identified as the messages. So as much as possible, when we are presenting, we don't want to repeat messages, but try to see what was said or what was not said or what you would have learned. Okay, so I'm creating the rooms now. You have 10 minutes, it's 7:08. So when it's 7:18, we're going to come back into the main session. Okay, we can see the last two groups seem to be having a whale of a time. Okay, all right, so everyone is back now. Let's hear from room one. Room one, what were your findings? Everyone would have had Bernadette Andrews, Donnie Stewart, Sister Vicky, and Anelia. So let me hear. Go ahead.
Only good evening, everyone. Bernadette Andrews speaking. We Sister Vicky and Anela listening in, and Donnie Stewart didn't contribute. At least I didn't hear him say anything. I don't know if he was the time. And the two messages we got, what we learned from the woman is that a wife must take care of her family. She must be a homemaker. And then in terms of providing provision of meals for the husband, that means it means that she's a wife in a home. When the man comes home, she must have his meal on his table for him. And immediately after cooking, she can put it aside. And when he comes, just before he sits on the table, she can warm it up and give it to him warm for him to eat. She must take out his meal after she finished cooking. That's what the woman learned. That's what the woman learns from the mother. What she learns from the man is that the man must respect the wife, and he must.
That's what she would have learned from. That's what one would have learned from his mother in the video.
In the video, so as in looking at the video, we're looking at what we learned in growing up.
In the video. But you could share if you discussed your personal experiences, you could share. Go ahead.
That's what we're doing. We're sharing our personal experiences.
Okay, go ahead.
And we're just saying that the man respects the wife, and he stays at home with the wife. If he's going on the road, he goes out with his wife.
Okay, so those are the
messages that we get from growing up.
Okay, great.
And then also another message I would like to share: if the man wants to go out and line with his friends or his buddies, that it should not be a time of quarreling or whatever. That the man is allowed to go out and line with his friends.
Okay, those are the messages that you would have gotten growing up, right?
Growing up, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Bernadette. It's nice to hear you. All right, so let's move on to room two. Room two had Donna, Esther, I think no, it was Esther, Pat, and Dahlia Watson. I know they didn't have a lot of persons who joined in that group initially. So let me hear someone from group two, room two.
All right, good night. What we learned from it is that the mother taught him to be a loving young man by the way she treated the father. And she also taught it. Well, she taught him that, well, he shouldn't wear makeup and those kind of things. His father taught him to play football. He also, unfortunately, taught him about alcohol. That was it for our group.
All right, thank you very much. Good to hear from you, Pat. All right, let's move on to group three. That's with Elizabeth James Hosford, Phil Parker, Sister Louise, Sister Cowie, Tashawn McPherson. So let me hear who is the rep from that group and what messages you all would have identified. Anyone? Did you all identify someone to present? I don't know if someone is trying to speak and they are muted, but I'm not hearing anything from room 3. So let's move on to room 4. We'll come back to room 3. Room 3, again, that's Elizabeth, Sister Parker, Sister Louise, Sister Cowie, and Tashawn McPherson. So we'll come back to you. Room 4, that's Sister Allison, Brian, Cheryl Charles, and I'm seeing Elizabeth here again, so I don't know which room she was really in. Maybe she logged into 2 places. But let's hear from room 4. What messages did you all identify? Go ahead to Sean. You want to share on behalf of room 3? So Sean, I see your hand raised. You could go ahead and unmute your mic. So Sean, I don't know if you're trying to speak, but your mic is muted. Okay, well, while they figure that out, can I get someone from room 4, please? That's with Sister Allison, Brian, Cheryl, Charles, and I think Elizabeth. I'm not sure if you were in that group or if you were in the other one, right? So someone from room 4, what were the messages that one would have learned in the video?
All right, Cheryl did join and Brian joined. We didn't have Elizabeth, but we had some views. I hope that you all could support me. Brian, I would just say one of each and you can help any others because it's the best way to do things. So one of the things that we observed was the alcohol drinking. He saw, I know that somebody did mention that already, that he saw his father coming home drunk. But in addition to that, he saw his parents quarreling. And he also saw that based on that, he saw he and Maria quarreling also. So what he would have learned that men and women quarrel and men and women drink, well, men drink. We also observed the difference where he was taught that he should play with a football. And even though he was taught that by the father, we noted that at the end of the video, when he was a father and took up that responsibility, that he was teaching his child not to just play a football. He was playing the guitar, musical instrument, and he was allowing him to not seemingly engage in a gender behavior between what boys play with and what girls play with. Ryan may have more to add to that.
Just one point regarding his mom, that what we saw in the video is that men have a responsibility as well in bringing up children. So I believe there was a scene when his mom was in the kitchen cooking. That's what we discussed, and the mom would have sent him to his dad. So we concluded that the point there being that men also have a responsibility, have a role in the family life, so that he would have learned that from his mom.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. That was excellent unpacking and excellent analysis. All right. So Jesse wants to share a little bit from his journal experience as well. I know in room 1, you all would have shared your actual, some of the actual messages that you would have learned about womanhood and manhood from your parents and your siblings. So Jesse just wants to share a little bit. And then we will kind of begin the pulling together process. Yeah.
So when I looked at the video, I started measuring what I saw in the video against my experiences growing up with both my parents. I saw some similarities and differences. How to put it? At home, chores were shared, so that was different. It wasn't that just sitting down watching sports. Chores were shared, to the point that actually favor my dad's cooking over my mom's, right? And to this day, they still share chores. And that is something that I practice here with my family. We share chores. When it comes to the breadwinner part of things, they both shared that responsibility. So I don't think the video was clear as to who the breadwinner was. We just probably assumed
in his family.
We probably assumed that in the video it was the dad, right? What was similar, dealing with frustration and stress, where it is easy to turn to the substance, because growing up, that's what I saw. No, I mostly saw that from my father when I got older rather than younger. So when he did it, he didn't do it in front of us.
When you were younger.
I do not recall him coming home drunk or tight or high or anything like that. I only saw that when I was significantly older. I'm talking about probably late teens, close to early 20s, okay, right? But still, visual learning is still learning, you know? So, and I would have seen that also being replicated in other men, that when it comes to dealing with stress and frustration, the easiest thing to do is to pull a bottle. Yeah. So, and then for enjoyment, same thing. Pull a bottle, right? So those were the similarities that I picked up and the differences that I picked up between my my background and the video that was shared.
So what about your mother though? Do you think you picked up any messages in terms of what it is to be a man from your mother, either directly or indirectly?
From my mother, I saw there were times where she would give way to certain things, but like, how to put it? I saw it as simple things, like when it comes to sharing of food, who get 2 or 3 pieces of meat.
Yeah, but mostly
versus
the males and your father.
Yeah, versus who get a wing alone or a leg alone.
Okay.
You know, food being taken out for him on a Sunday and being placed with a mat, knife and fork, his juice, and I saw it in those things where she would give way to, because he's the man of the house. So, you know, it was like a subliminal message that the man of the house, yeah, he get the bigger and best piece of meat, and you know, and he get the most, you know, and he is treated a certain way at meal times, especially on a Sunday. You know, and if he says we fasting, yeah, we fasting. It have no ifs or buts or maybes about it. If he says we going to church, everybody going to church. You know, but if she said it, it was like, if we feel to.
Okay, it was an option.
It was an option.
Okay.
But when he said it, she reinforced it, what
Okay.
he said. You know, she reinforced what he put down.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing. So I'm really glad that you raised some of those things, because you would recall that when we talked about the 3 A's of mentorship, they were active listening, availability, and analysis. And so a lot of what I would have been sharing in this module really are some of the tools for that 3rd A, analysis. Jesse would have spoken a lot about active listening and even availability in his first module. And we'll talk a bit more next week as we go to the final module to pull those things together. But when it comes to gender-based violence, in order to use mentorship to prevent it and even to stop it, we have to be able to identify the belief systems, the stereotypes, and the various influences that can cause a mentee to use their influence, to use their strength, to use their power in harmful ways against others, and in some cases even against themselves. So that's the reason why we had to unpack some of those things. If you objectively, in most Caribbean homes, the man in the house gets the largest piece of chicken. And we don't think that has something to do with gender. We don't think of it even, because it just always happens. That's just the way things are. But by looking at the foundations, how we are socialized, even the gender box, our expectations, by understanding these concepts, when we engage with our mentees, when we talk with them, when we do different activities, whether it's simple things like exercise, going for ice cream, just a phone call, as you start to communicate, as the bond starts to be created, these are some of the tools that you will have to rely on to help you analyze the behavior, understand what is said, understand what is not said. It will give you tools to know what questions to ask as well, to find out even about what is life like at home, their parenting styles, that they are exposed to, their family history. Because until you know what questions to ask, you know what direction to try to steer conversations, we won't be able to really address this issue of gender-based violence. So I know for some persons, you may think it's a little counterintuitive that we didn't start with a definition of what gender-based violence is, but you have to understand the difference between gender, sex, and all those other stuff first before we get to our actual definition. So gender-based violence is violence that is directed against a person because of that person's gender. So because you're a woman, I will exert my power and influence over you.
Or even maybe because you identify
as a woman, or as a man,
or you identify as gay, as queer, as all the various.
So the other part of gender-based violence is that it's also violence that affects persons of a particular gender disproportionately. It is rooted in gender inequality, the abuse of power, and harmful norms. So in order for you to understand this definition, we had to lay the foundation. What is gender? Understand some of the power dynamics that that are taught, I would say. You know, they say that there are some lessons that are taught and some that are taught. Very often when it comes to gender and the shoulds and the expectations, majority of that is caught by our culture, by our family, by religion, by politics, by the music, by the television shows that we watch as well, and even by our community. in Trinidad and Tobago, our carnival culture also plays a big role in terms of our concepts of what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a man, and this idea of virility and the overt display of our sexuality. All of those things play a part in our understanding of gender and how our gender expressions come about. So gender-based violence, you would have seen some of the key terms because of a person's gender. And I know there is a debate whether persons, or especially the media, just paints gender-based violence on any act of violence against a woman. But it's important for you to understand that violence against a woman is not always gender-based. Sometimes it is just crime. Yeah, I know it's tricky. Sometimes it's just crime. You just happen to be there. You just happen to be the person that is robbed and killed.
Yeah.
But when we talk about gender-based violence, it is violence that is based on the premise that you are a man. It may be related to stereotypes. You are a man, all men are dogs. So I'm going to treat him, I'm going to be aggressive with him because I don't want for any man to walk over me. I am an independent woman. I'm strong and powerful. And so if he bad talk, if he only raises his voice at me, I'm going to kick him down today. That's gender-based violence because he's a man. Similarly, if it is done to a woman because she is seen as weak, and she is seen as not having, or you feel that you have the power and the authority in your home or in your organization, and so that you feel like that gives you the right to be extremely aggressive or violent with your words or violent with your actions towards the other person.
I'd like to weigh in on something really quick. The key thing to help you understand when violence is classed as gender-based, it comes back to the fact that it is rooted in gender inequality, the abuse of power, and harmful norms. The critical things are what this action or event, or however you want to coin it, what it is rooted in. So, for example, and there's this whole debate of an alpha man and a beta man, beta male, alpha male and beta male. So let's say in a work environment where there's probably males in an office or in a space, and there's a alpha male who picks and bullies on another male or other males that he views as less than, or that he sees as himself as more powerful than, because probably the other males probably a little more soft-spoken, or probably dresses a bit different, or probably not as aggressive or assertive as he is.
Or as a one-woman type of man.
Or maybe a one-woman man, right? That too is gender-based violence.
Right? And so it's important to, again, remember the stuff that we would have identified in the gender box. And I would have said that one of violence tends to also be one of the punishments that is meted out to persons who behave in behaviors that is outside of that gender box, right? However, with some instances of gender-based violence, some people would behave even within the confines of the gender box, but because of their conformity to these ideals that sometimes are not unrealistic, unattainable, or I should say more like lofty goals and ideals. Even though you behave in that way, it creates a picture either of weakness, or it creates a picture that you are I don't want to use the word submissive because I like the word submissive, but that you are a conformer. And so because you conform to this particular ideal, then those who don't conform are seen as the powerful ones who have that strength to withstand against the norms, etc. Right?
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
What role does education play in gender-based violence?
When you say education, in terms of the prevention or the cause? From what side of the angle? What side of the cause? Okay.
And I'm saying this because when you go to university, in your orientation, they will tell you up front that violence occur against women in both ways, but mostly against women in that scenario, because men feel threatened when a woman become educated, especially if they got married and they were the same level, and if woman is the aggressive one in terms of education, you can have gender-based violence occurring. But we can also have gender-based violence occurring against men when you have women come from a matriarchal home and they feel that they don't have to respond to men, or men are dogs, put it that way. So the violence goes both ways. But to me, there is a catalyst and a role education play with women in gender-based violence. Just want to throw that. I actually have any views on it.
I do have some views on it. Unfortunately, I know of quite a few couples who higher education brought about the end of their relationship. And I think I have seen it happen, especially where, but it comes down to perceptions of power. Education is used as a vehicle to advance persons in their career, open doors, etc. And fortunately for some, they're able to manage that power in a way that does not emasculate their partners. However, there are some who, and I've seen both sides of the coin, there are some women who, because of their education, they gain a sense of power and entitlement, and then they now feel like they're better than their husband. And instead of trying to either work with your husband or encourage the husband to elevate his education status, or even just accepting that my husband is not into the school and just valuing his strengths for who he is, etc., they know they are the ones who get aggressive, or they pick up an outside person and they start to want to control the money and those kinds of things. And the flip side now, you have some of those males because of their own insecurities and because of how they were socialized, their perceptions about what a woman should be are threatened when their female partner becomes educated. And also that could be they threaten for no reason. They threaten because of stories that they've heard from other people that, when women become educated, they change and all those other things. Mm-hmm. And then there is the ideology that some, especially young persons, have that, well, not just young persons. It is said that when men marry a woman, they have the perception that she will not change. Whereas when women marry men, they have the perception that he will change for the better, etc. So education, I agree with you, tends to be one of the catalysts, especially in married relationships, that can cause some.
I just want to weigh in quickly, and I'm glad this came up. Reason being, I believe a lot of it, when it comes to any discussion pertaining to education and how a person behaves and their attitude, I believe a lot of it comes back to the individual's concept of what education is.
And what it means, and
what it means,
to them,
and what it means to them. So for me, as I went through the pieces from 2008 to now in my educational journey, it is the more I see the need and realize that I need to be humble, that I need to be a servant. Yes, the learning you will get gives you a sense of entitlement. It gives you a sense of, I have journeyed this far, I have worked this far, and I deserve X, Y, and Z. But how to put it, there's a statement that I love. I can't remember the philosopher who I got it from, right? The more I learn is the more I realize I know nothing. And that is the attitude that I adopted. The more I learn is the more I realize I know nothing. And I keep that in the back of my mind so that I remember my education is about being humble, is about being contented, and it is not about I being on a pedestal and everything surrounds me. It's not about that. So with that said, personally, I believe we have a lot of certificate holders and not educated people.
Mm-hmm.
Because education, as how I view it, should bring a change in behavior, thought, and attitude.
Well, I hear you, I agree with you. I guess the issue as well comes with that persons, just as you said, persons' ideas of what education means can be some different. If I view education, if I seek education as a means of learning more, bettering myself, etc., then I could see it benefiting a relationship. And that person is more likely to also share, I learned this in school. And so it becomes a journey for the couple, as opposed to someone who views education as a means to escape a situation, to elevate themselves, to make themselves somebody, whereas they view themselves as nobody before. And so the person who views education in that way is going to end up in an identity crisis on completion, because they went with the intention of changing and they would not necessarily bring their partner along. And so at the end of their education journey, the partner doesn't recognize them.
Yeah.
Right? But a lot of that comes back to, again, concepts of self and even concepts about how we view power. So for one person, it could be education. For another person, it could be a new job position or a job promotion. Can change the dynamics within a relationship. Now, Jesse raised an interesting point as we begin to wrap up and move out to the end. He talked about this concept of bullying, and it has to be raised when we talk about gender-based violence as well. You can check the chat, please. Right, thanks. Bullying is an ongoing and deliberate misuse of power in relationships through repeated verbal, physical, and or social behavior that intends to cause harm, right? And very often we see that there is a gender-based violence can often manifest itself as bullying, and very often it does, especially within the school context. Now, I included this because a lot of the persons if you're mentoring young people, you're going to have to interact with it. Sister Alison, I see your hand, right? If in bullying in particular, there are three main persons to take into consideration: the bully, the person who's being bullied, and the bystander, the person who sees. So when we are talking about gender-based violence and when you're also mentoring young persons, it's important to also consider who their social circles are. Because if, as a bystander, I see somebody engaging in a particular behavior, or they're displaying patterns that indicate this is a potential abuser, etc., and I say nothing, it means that it could mean that I am either an enabler, or it could mean that I don't see myself in a place of influence or having the authority to speak on the matter. And so as a mentor, I want you to begin stretching your mind in terms of your influence, not only in terms of your mentee, but also exploring their relationships with their friends and what their friends think about different situations, right? So we see again this concept of power. Who is seen as more powerful? Who is seen as having more strength in a relationship? Who possesses control? Who has the influence over others? Go ahead, Sister Allison.
Yeah, so I like the concept that education is a tool and could be used as a power tool in relationships. But what I'm thinking back is that given the concept of the group one that shared how they saw gender, I am looking at being a working woman all of my life. I stopped working so long ago. But the issue that comes up here is what is the traditional thought of what was the role of a man and a woman, which have changed now with women working. And I think that this plays a big part where you girls, you women are prepared, they are told, go and get an education and support yourself. And these same women do not give their sons that responsibility, that they should also strive to be a father, the breadwinner of a home, or how to manage this relationship between the woman who is educated and what was the generic or former thinking of what is a woman's role in the home. I see that conflict occurring, and it's reinforced sometimes by the older generation, and there's a different view on the younger generation, and that could create bullying and that issue of power in gender-based violence. I don't know what is your views on it.
Excellent. I just told Jessie, don't comment on it. We've talked about this so much, especially in our community. We have a friend who is a single mother, and this issue comes up over and over again, because I remember she was saying that in her family, her father pushed her to seek out education, etc. And that was not pushed with her brother. Her brother was allowed to do whatever. Yes, he got the lion's share of, financial support and all of that. But she, as the woman, was pushed to educate yourself, get a government work, those kinds of things. But at the same time, she was explaining that it was strange for her because of how she saw how her father treated other women. And she felt that message was pushed to her because, well, she said because he know how he does treat women, he didn't want that to happen to his daughter. But also, you're right in terms of the change in culture and the change in times. We have shifted from a time where women were seen as property, and now women are seen, it's attributed them as an asset in families, and are seen as having a voice and having their own power, which is actually where I wanted to kind of end off today's session before we go into the sidebar. We have a few minutes. So we talked so much about this idea of power and authority and influence. And remember, power is power. That's the famous quote from our show. Power is power. But authority is recognized and authenticated power given to someone by another person, right, or entity. So the question I want you all to think about for next week is who or what gives power and who or what gives authority to persons? What creates this idea that a husband has the right has unlimited access to his wife's body? who gives that a man that power or that authority? Who gives a woman the power or the authority that she manages the home? So when it comes to laundry, when it comes to grocery meals, etc., when it comes to what the lessons that children are taught, that we feel that is the woman's, that is her area of authority, that is what she has power in. Who gives us that power? Now, I want to put it to you that one of the agencies that gives men and women that sense of power and authority, whether it is real power or perceptions that they have this power, is organized religion, right? That's one. Because remember, when we talk about gender socialization and socialization on a whole, family, key social, what's the word they use? Key vehicle agent, right? Key agent of socialization. Religion is another key agent of socialization. And then we have the school system as well, right? So last week, I said that we would touch briefly on, that we talk a bit about how the church views women and how gender is addressed in the church. And after praying about it, thinking about it, etc., I'm not going to go too much into it because I'm not a theologian, right? I am a humble servant of the Lord. I read my Bible and pray. I've been to a couple courses. And also because this course seeks to really address gender-based violence as opposed to the role of men and women in the church. I'm so glad that Sister Lawrence is here. Perhaps she could, whisper to Pastor Lawrence. I don't mind sending an email as well, and we could create a forum to discuss that, because I'm aware of what is the position of the Wesleyan Church in America when it comes to women in ministry and the place of women in church. I am aware of the general Wesleyan history where women have been ordained as leaders from Donkey Kong Ohio Day, and that we were one of the first denominations to recognize women in ministry. But just because that is the case elsewhere does not mean that that is what is experienced in the region. And that is not my area of expertise. But we must know that these are some of, I just put on the screen here, some of the verses that are often used or mentioned whenever the discussion of gender, especially when it comes to what role women should play in church, comes up. We have, my favorite, of course, is that neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female, you are all one in Christ Jesus. Then there's the other idea that women should not teach or exercise authority over a man. Rather, she is to remain quiet. And we also have verses that speak about husband and wife relationships, identifying the husband as the head of the wife. And then we also see in the New Testament, all of these are New Testament ideas, that women were involved in ministry as co-laborers together in the gospel, pushing the gospel of Jesus Christ. So it's important to remember that as a mentor, this course, as I said, is not for me to tell you this is the position that you should have, but it's to expose you to information and to share that whatever your position is. I know that there are some Christians who believe that women should not be in leadership in the church, and there are some who believe that women should not be pastors, but it's okay to teach Sunday school, youth ministry, and there are some, now we have extremes, and then we have persons who vary along the continuum. So I don't want you to think just because I may feel women should not be pastors, that I also feel women should not preach on a Sunday, or they have no capacity to teach or to write books or to host a podcast, But there are different ideas about the role of women in church and how women should be viewed. But one thing that the Bible is clear about for both men and women is that we are all created in God's image and likeness. Therefore, as image bearers, we go back to the beginning. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. He created man, male and female. He created them. And as image bearers, it's important for us, whatever our theological basis, whether you have personal beliefs that may vary from the church that you're attending, and I know that absolutely happens, it's important for us to model the valuing of our brothers and our sisters, the valuing of life to the persons that we're called to mentor, right? I want to encourage you, dig in. If you're a Christian and you are uncertain, dig into the Bible. Listen to what learned theologians or philosophers are. Talk to your pastor. I don't know why, for some reason, I guess my experience is different because I'm a pastor's kid. I grew up talking to my pastor about all these issues. Why in the Wesleyan church, at one point, you couldn't wear jewelry. Why no cinema? What was the history behind all of that? Talk to your pastor. Very often we create our own theologies and our own ideologies based on assumptions and not actually knowing what does your pastor think about it? What does the denomination you're in? What is the official position? What does the Bible say? So that's all that I am going to share in terms of those controversial ideas about gender. I also want to highlight that the Bible specifies things for men, for women, and some of it is different to what they specify for husbands and wives, okay? So you'll also hear some person say just because the Bible said the husband is the head of the wife, it did not say the man is the head of the woman, right? Again, ask your pastor, have those discussions. I think that these are great debates, especially that you could have with your young people, get them to start thinking, or even with your mentees, you could link up with each other. If your mentee is in a particular religious faith or if they are Christian, these are the conversations that you could have over a period of time to get them to think, to get them to start thinking critically about even what we've come to believe. Mm-hmm. So you could start with how religion creates this idea of who has power, who doesn't have power, and then you can go out now to their family. How their family creates these ideas about who has power, who doesn't have as much power and authority, and even the education system, your culture, your history. All right? Sister Parker, so I see your hand raised, go ahead.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Suppose you are a leader in a church, right? You know, when they won't call you a pastor, right? But you're the lead person there. And in a prayer meeting, a member begins praying by saying, she says, well, Sister Pearl, you know, has her faults and so on. And this person begins by saying that we want a leader, we want a man, you know, and demands that God give them the male person by the end of the year. And you are there sitting, you know, and I know, or, you know, I know that God spoke to me, right? And told me certain things. What should I do? Wouldn't you say that that is disrespectful? Because I'm sitting there and I begin praying and saying something like that. You know, should I remain quiet? Well, I am the type of person who don't like to confront, but I want to know a situation like that.
I'm really glad that you said that you are not the type of person to confront, because the question that you asked in terms of what you should do, persons will respond differently based on personality, their characteristics, and also at the end of the day, for me, this is an issue related to conflict, and I always go back to what the Bible recommends, right? Which is, if you are offended by a brother or a sister, you go to the brother and you state your claim, speaking the truth in love with grace. You're not going to season your words with too much pepper at this time. But definitely, I would not recommend that you address it publicly like that, because that's not the biblical model for dealing with conflict, which we're talking about next week when we touch on a little bit about conflict resolution, right? If after that they have not, there is no resolution to the issue, then the Bible recommends you take somebody else, and then you escalate it, right? Now, to me, that is just basic in whatever the offense, that is what the Bible recommends. Now, I don't necessarily, I think I am a different type of person, because it's very hard for me to be offended by people who are not directly within my immediate circle. Jesse could offend me. My sister could offend me. But I recognize that people are people. And the same way we were saying that even with the education, that sometimes we have particular perceptions about power and perceptions about how things should be. But when it comes to what people pray, I don't fret up about it. At the end of the day, the person who answers prayers is God. So if it is, if they're praying to God for something, if it is God's will, it will happen. If it is not in the will of God, then it won't happen. And so if they're in a public setting and they're praying these things, then you could pray what you want. That's fine. However, in addressing the offense, I would share with them that, how it impacted me, that it hurt me. I felt disrespected or undermined, etc. And I wished that perhaps you could have discussed this with me in a private forum or something like that, because one of the things, especially if it was communicating as a woman to a man, sometimes we get, as women, we can get caught up in sharing the feelings, emotions, without necessarily asking for what we want, and we make the assumption that the person will know. So, yeah, Jesse wants to interject. That's my position as biblical model of conflict resolution.
Sister Pearl Parker, just two things I would like you to know. One, you are not at fault for feeling the way you would have felt at the point in time. There's no wrong in that. And secondly, what God has shown you for your life, the will that He has for you, man could try how much they want. What God has ordained for you, once you are faithful to His cause, you are faithful to your relationship with Him, it shall come to pass.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
And the final thing with relation to that scenario as well is also understanding